Ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going to get started. It's 7 o'clock, and I'd like to get things rolling here. My name is Tim Dunphy. I happen to be the fire chief. Many of you might be wondering why I am doing the moderating tonight. If you find out, let me know. Actually, Law Director Corrigan was unable to attend and simply asked if I would step in and just help moderate this. And it is a little bit fitting that the fire department has an opportunity to speak to you tonight, other than the fact that I'm probably the shortest guy in the room and this podium's right in front of me. So if you can't see me, I apologize. But we do have some concerns when it comes to fire safety in rental properties. So therefore, Law Director Corrigan asked if I could step in and just kind of help moderate for tonight. On my left, we have Chris Canary. She is from the Fair Housing Organization, Fair Housing Center Organization. She's going to speak to you regarding some things tonight, right after me. And then to my right, did I say my right over here?
No, you're okay.
I was good, all right. To my right over here, we have Chris Parmalee, and Chris is the Assistant Building Commissioner for the City of Lakewood. He's going to have the main body of the presentation tonight. And then over in the side of the building over here, we have the West Shore Young Leaders Group from the West Shore Enforcement Bureau Drug Task Force. They're here to have some information about you, about tobacco prevention and different handouts and stuff, that if you could stop on your way out and go see Noreen Kyle. She will be glad to give you some information for possibly some of your tenants. The first thing I'd like to start with the fire department and renting properties. As you heard me mention to Mr. Kalani in the back, well-respected member of our community. He's been here for a long time, number of years. We know him very well. But we come out and do inspections if you have bigger buildings. Fire department does inspections on apartment buildings that are 5 suites or more, so 6 suiters and up. However, we do have a tendency to go to double houses and smaller apartment buildings if called for a medical emergency and or a fire, that people would have a need to have us respond. If our medical emergency occurs and our squads show up to one of your rental dwellings, which is very possible that you don't get inside as often as you would like to or have a chance to, things can get a little bit out of hand. We have hoardings situations, we have animal issues, unsanitary living conditions, and because it's a multiple dwelling, we have an urgency to help correct those actions. So we would then reach out to the owner, not the tenant. We, in the fire department, and for the most part, building department, we deal with you guys, the owners. So if there's an issue in one of your units, that somebody has a small fire, but during the process of that, we see a condition that's unsafe or unsanitary, we'll be notifying you, and we try to work with everybody to get those things rectified. Most common question we get from landlords and owners is, what is the requirements for smoke detectors and CO detectors? Lakewood has an ordinance that we passed in the late 90s, and I see you, Elizabeth. We have they were just in another landlord that came into the fire department proactively looking for an answer before they had to go out and buy something. It was about a CO detector just last week. We do require plug-in 110 type CO detectors. A lot of the ordinance has not caught up with the technology. When we started the ordinance in the 90s, we immediately did not allow battery-operated smoke or battery-operated CO detectors. They were giving false readings, they were inaccurate, causing false alarms. We went to 110. I will say they have come a long way in the battery-operated technology, and we are looking at that in the future. But as of today, you're required to have a 110 plug-in type smoke detector. They've come down quite a bit in price. Bless you. They've come down quite a bit in price. Do not get tripped up by saying, I have a combination smoke detector and CO detector. First Alert just came out with one last year, decent price, less of price combined, not code for us. We're looking at it because the technology is catching up. As far as battery operated goes, you need to have a 10-year tamper-proof. Used to say lithium ion and all different specifications on batteries. Don't worry about it. 10-year tamper-proof, 110 plug-in. That's simple, okay? I'm gonna tell you a quick thing that I think is really important that I personally want to bring up. I was a former fire marshal for the last 8 years in the city before becoming the chief. I had the pleasure of working with some great guys and investigating a lot of fires. Unfortunately for us, we find a very common thing that can greatly affect your investment. Tenants do not have renter's insurance. A very large percentage of them. Out of over the 100 fires I've investigated, there's been less than 5 that have been insured properly. It doesn't make a huge amount of difference to you in the sense that, you know, ultimately, it's just a lot more of a hassle. It makes it a lot easier for you if they have insurance. Everything's covered by their insurance. That makes your job a lot easier having to deal with your insurances. Ultimately, you can get it back, you're covered by insurance and all that stuff, but it makes it a lot easier. It's something that they don't know about. It's a very inexpensive thing. It's approximately $100 a month. $100 a year. It was about $150 a year. It's very, very small. They don't get it. They don't know it. It's not out of the question for you to put it in your lease agreement, but at least as a minimum, put it in there that you highly recommend it and sign off that you don't have it. Okay? I also recommend it when you put your tenants, any kind of agreement you have that they're signing, document that you have a smoke detector and a CO detector installed. Check it and tell them to notify you if it goes bad. If they leave and they take it, you can get it back through your legal means. Okay? If anybody has any question for the fire department, I can give you a quick phone number to the fire marshal's office, especially when it comes to the specifications of the smoke detectors and CO detectors. It's 216-529-6660. His name is Ryan Fairbanks, and he's very good about getting back to everybody. Or you can stop at Station 1 on Madison Avenue, Monday through Friday, you know, before 4 o'clock, 4:30. There's always somebody there. Okay? I'm going to turn it over now to the Fair Housing Center with Chris Canary. I guess I should have went up there.
I'm sorry to
I
have
didn't
my
even
back to
think
you.
about
Yeah.
Scooch over.
Yeah.
See if I can do this in a way that you can hear me. All right. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Canary. I am from the Fair Housing Center. We used to be called the Housing Research and Advocacy Center and changed our name. So, we are the Fair Housing Center that serves, you know, most of Cuyahoga and Lorraine counties. And we've had a long-standing partnership with the city of Lakewood and are grateful to be a regular presenter at these landlord sessions that the city does. It is important, even if you've been before, and I'm certain a number of you have seen me, you know, for these sessions in the past, it is important to be aware of fair housing law as you're in the business of providing housing. You are, regardless of how well-informed or educated you are about the subject, you are subject to that, you know, those legal regulations. And so, you know, knowledge is power. It can help you protect your investment and make sure that you're, you know, providing housing on an equal opportunity basis throughout the city. So we're grateful for this partnership with the city. We have a common interest, and we'll go ahead and move forward here with the presentation. I will be here, this is about a half an hour, so there may or may not be time for questions, but I'll ask if we could hold them to the end just to make sure we get through the content. So the mission of the Fair Housing Center is to protect and expand fair housing rights, eliminate housing discrimination, and promote integrated communities. We offer direct advocacy. We are a resource, please know that. You can contact us, just like tenants can contact us. If you have a tenant who you think is struggling with a particular housing-related issue, you could even suggest that they might contact us, for information or assistance. We work a lot to try and resolve disputes or concerns when they come up between landlords and tenants, and try and deliver education. Sometimes housing providers might make a statement or suggest something that rubs a tenant the wrong way. And sometimes it's, again, lack of awareness of the law. And so education can go a long way, both with tenants and with housing providers in understanding each of your rights and responsibilities. So we are your partner. Please use us as a resource. We've got fair housing laws at the federal, state, and local level. If you've got property in Lakewood, you've got Lakewood codified ordinances that regulate for fair housing law. There is the county ordinance, there is a state law, and a federal law. So try and talk about this. It's all blanketing and layers, of protection and rights and responsibilities. There are two main goals of the Federal Fair Housing Act when it was passed back in 1968. The first, most of us can guess, is to eliminate or make it illegal to discriminate against folks, right? The second one gets a little less attention, so we always like to point it out, is to promote residential integration and to undo the effects of our past practices and policies of discriminating, right? To try and right the ship, so to speak. And that commonly gets referred to as affirmatively furthering fair housing, taking steps to counteract past discrimination and inequality. Fair housing is critical for a number of reasons. And, when you think about access to housing and the home, even think about the homes that you've each chosen to live in, right? It determines what access to what schools, if you have children, they might get to go to. What kind of grocery stores or healthy foods are around, parks, jobs, healthcare, things like that. And where you live can also impact your life outcomes, access to opportunity, upward mobility, exposure to negative things, right, like environmental hazards or toxins as well. So, home means so much to people, and you're in the business of providing homes to people. So this is a big responsibility and a big honor that, that you can share that with others and provide a home for your tenants. At the federal level, when they passed the Fair Housing Act, they said, we want to make it illegal to discriminate on a number of bases, right? So they call these the protected classes or the protected characteristics. So all of us belong to one or more protected classes under the law. So the federal ones are in plain text, and our state protections are at the bottom there, underlined. So originally, when they first passed it, race, color, national origin, and religion. So this was part of the Civil Rights Act of 1968. So those first four protected classes existed when they passed it in 68. They added sex in 74, and they amended it one more time in 1988. So our federal law hasn't changed in over 30 years. So we added familial status and disability in 88. State law has changed. This is another reason it's important to get regular training updates, because the laws do change from time to time. So ancestry has been part of our state law for a long time as a protected characteristic, and military status was added in 2008. Many cities and counties have additional local protections. So this is a big old list. The ones with the stars: sexual orientation, gender identity, gender, marital status, and creed, and on the right-hand column, physical characteristic, are all covered under Lakewood's codified ordinances as protected characteristics. And that's available to you in Chapter 516 of the codified ordinances for the city, if you wanted to look into that further. Just going to talk a little bit about a few of the protected classes to explain some examples, because they're not always obvious. So when sex was added in 1974, the idea was to level the playing field for women who sometimes housing providers didn't want to rent to because they thought, oh, how would you take care of a place all by yourself, right? Or what if you got pregnant or lost your job? Who would, this is a lot of negative stereotypes, right? So they added protection based on sex back in '74 to level the playing field in that way. Since that time, this protection on the basis of our sex has been expanded through case law and through interpretation by the courts and by HUD and others who enforce the act. And it has been expanded to include now also protection to folks who are survivors of domestic violence, for example. So a victim, not the perpetrator of domestic violence, but the victim, right, should not be discriminated against based on that status. Nonconformity with sex role stereotypes. So at the federal level, gender is not a protected characteristic. Sex is. But it has been interpreted over the years, and HUD at the federal level is now treating nonconformity with sexual stereotypes as protected or prohibited, a prohibited basis of discrimination. So sexual orientation and gender identity aren't expressly protected at the federal level, but people could allege, because I'm in a relationship with someone who's the same sex as me, they're treating me differently because I don't conform to the way they expect me to behave, right, by being in a relationship with someone of the opposite sex, for example. And then lastly, sexual harassment. And this is a really critical one, and I will say, it can be a single instance of a severe or unwanted, act, or something that's pervasive, minor instances that continue to occur and are unwanted in nature, right, of an approach or an expressed interest. It's best not to mix business and, dating relationships as a general rule. I would encourage that. And beyond that, though, I just want to say, it is, if you think about it, your home is your refuge, right? You come in, you shut the door. And so when there are complaints or concerns coming up of an abusive right of access to a unit, you have to give, under landlord-tenant law, 24 hours or reasonable notice to come, into the unit unless there's an emergency going on. Sometimes people don't give that notice. Sometimes people come in without notice and the person might be sleeping or the person might be bathing, right? Those kinds of things can lead to these kinds of concerns. And so, again, always best practice to give that notice, let people know, forewarned is forearmed, right? And to also respect, obviously, personal boundaries if people are, not interested in a relationship you might be interested in and they are your tenant. With respect to familial status, this is considered an affirmative protection, like disability. These are the two that were added in 1988. Familial status protects people who have children, not those who don't. So I couldn't be discriminated against for not having children, or I could be discriminated against for not having children, but it wouldn't be unlawful discrimination, right? Familial status protects folks with minors in the household. And so they could be their own children, they could be adoptive or foster children, they could be their grandchildren if they have a custodial or guardianship arrangement or in that process. And that's just important to be mindful of. Some common things that we see come up with respect to familial status discrimination include things like setting a low occupancy limit. So let's say you have a 3-bedroom, single-family home for rent, average bedroom sizes, and you say maximum 3 people, right? And maybe think ideal for college students who want to share, a living place, right? Maybe it is ideal, but certainly a larger family than 3 might comfortably live, and probably many of us or our parents' generations were comfortably or uncomfortably living in much more crowded situations than 1 per bedroom. So, you want to look to the local occupancy code, and the city's code is available online. I'm certain you can call our office or you can contact the city for information. Before you advertise that your unit is available, it's great to know what's the total square footage, what's the habitable living space, and then for sleeping purposes, what rooms qualify for sleeping as sleeping rooms, and how many people, based on the square footage of those rooms, could occupy that unit safely, right? So you know before you advertise that way, if somebody reaches out and says, hey, we're interested in renting, we saw your ad for the 3-bedroom home, it's my husband and I, and we have 4 children. And you start doing the math, and you're like, okay, that's 6, but the 1-bedroom, I don't know if it's big enough. And then they start thinking, oh, you don't want to rent to us because we have children, right? And that's illegal discrimination. So if you know ahead of time, you know what the exact number is. Doesn't matter if they're adults or children, right? The total number of people or occupants is how the occupancy code goes. And so you can be informed ahead of time to help avoid that potential pitfall. And you can, rely on your local occupancy code in setting your maximum number of occupants for your units. Another thing that can sometimes come up and can be confusing for folks is, this question about whether boys and girls could share the same bedroom. And there are some programs, some federal programs that would not require 2 children of an opposite sex to share a bedroom. However, there's no requirement that they not, and there's no prohibition on that. So it would be discouraged for a housing provider to make that requirement or stipulate that. Folks can, according to the occupancy code, decide how they want to arrange themselves. If it's 5 people can live in this unit and there's 3 bedrooms and they, all 5 move in, they can decide who lives in which room and how that goes, There's no prohibition, though, on bedroom sharing. So disability is another one that's important to talk about. It is maybe not the most frequent form of discrimination, but it is definitely the most widely reported form of discrimination, and it has been for years. Because people who are discriminated on the basis of their disability are more likely to know it, right? They might say, for example, I have a service animal that helps me get around, and if the housing provider says, oh, we don't allow dogs, they know they were just denied because they need this service animal, right? And so it's obvious, it can be more often known or apparent. It's also an area of the law that's a little different, because generally fair housing law would have us treat everyone the same, regardless of their race, the color of their skin, their religion, et cetera. When it comes to disability, that's where there's a departure, right? Because the law provides for a couple additional rights and protections for folks with disabilities to level the playing field and to allow them to fully use and enjoy, their home. Understanding and acknowledging that most of our housing stock, in this city certainly and in the country, is older, right? And not built to be accessible and usable for people with various physical or other disabilities. So the definition for disability, folks who are protected, are folks who have a physical or a mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, folks who have a record of having an impairment like that, and folks who are regarded as or perceived to be somebody with a disability, whether or not they in fact do have a disability. And the protection extends to people who are associated with or residing with a person with a disability. So, for example, a parent with a child who has a disability, they would be protected from discrimination by proxy, sort of, in that situation. So, covered disabilities include things like, hearing loss, mobility impairment, visual impairments, mental illness, any number of, physical or mental health diagnoses. It's important to note alcoholism or past substance abuse are also considered covered disabilities. So folks who are in recovery are protected as folks with disabilities under the Fair Housing Act. And this is true at the federal, state, and our local levels. It does. So if somebody is actively abusing drugs or alcohol, they are not protected. If they are in recovery, then they are protected. Current illegal drug users, current abusers of alcohol, folks who would pose a direct threat to the health or safety of others, or who would cause substantial physical damage to the property, are not protected, right, under the law for certain purposes. So the additional protections that they wrote in 1988 are the right to a reasonable accommodation, which is a change in the policy that a housing provider would normally use and have in place, or a reasonable modification, is a physical change, a structural change to the property. And then also, any housing that's built for first occupancy, if it's multifamily housing, 4 or more connected units, built after March 13th, 1991, have to have certain accessible design features. And so if you look at some of the newer apartment complexes that go in, or if you go into newer buildings even, they're all generally built to these standards where they have usable hardware where somebody could easily pull a door open without having to grip and turn a round orbital doorknob. They have the lever handles now, and you can grab those if you have your hands full. You can, so it's more usable and accessible really across the board. Wider doorways, things of that nature, steps. Obviously there would be a route, an accessible route that wouldn't require use of steps. When it comes to reasonable accommodations, again, that's a change in the normal policies or procedures you would have in place. If you're asked for an accommodation by a tenant, a prospective tenant, now it's important to note somebody could ask you this before they lease up with you while they're looking at your unit. They could ask for it while they're living there. They could ask for it in order to avoid an eviction action you might be pursuing against them, right? The law says very clearly that folks can ask for an accommodation at any time. If you are asked for a reasonable accommodation, you can ask for proof that the individual has a disability covered under fair housing law if their disability is not known to you or apparent. You can also, ask for, if the thing that they're asking to be accommodated for, there has to be a connection between their disability and the thing they're asking, right? So in the example I mentioned earlier, I have a service dog to help me get around because of my disability, right? Or I have a dog that helps alert me before I have a seizure, right? Or I have suffered from depression, and my therapist suggested I get a dog to help, right, me cope with my depression. So animals can provide therapeutic benefits to people in all kinds of ways, right? And many of us who have pets probably also recognize the benefits, even if we weren't prescribed our animals, that they can have in our lives. But it's important that the person be able to show the connection between their disability and the accommodation they're asking for. So if you have a no pet policy, that you would waive that policy to allow the animal if the person needed it in connection with their disability. They still have responsibilities to take care of the animal, not to disturb other residents, et cetera, but the law says that you would have to consider that request and reasonably accommodate them, and that's a very routine one that comes up often. I did want to mention to you that we do have a new flyer that we put together providing a little overview for you on service and assistance animals in housing. It is a topic that comes up a lot. There tend to be questions. It's what can I ask? What can I say? Do I have to do this? I want to handle it the right way kind of situation. And so this is just sort of a high-level summary of some guidance that HUD just put out. Again, there's been guidance over the years on this. They had a 7-page document in 2013 that they put out that sort of spelled out the process for landlords and housing providers. And they put out something like a 20-some page document just last month. So we have hot off the presses some additional guidance and detail from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And so we tried to summarize that succinctly for you, and there's a handout out on the table out there. So housing providers can deny a request for an accommodation if it would pose an undue financial and administrative burden or fundamentally alter the business or the services that you provide. So if I said to you, hey, I have a little trouble driving because of my disability, and so I need as an accommodation for you to drive me to the grocery store. If you don't routinely provide transportation services to your other tenants, you wouldn't be required to accommodate my disability-related need to go to the grocery store by driving me, right? And there might be other services or resources available to residents that you could point them in the direction of, right? But that wouldn't fall to a housing provider to do that because it would fundamentally alter the nature of the relationship or the service that you provide. I hope that today, we're not going to, all become experts at the end of a half-hour talk about fair housing. But I hope today that we at least plant a seed and that you can sort of identify or recognize some things that might be fair housing issues and maybe reach out. If we can be a resource to you, or reach out or look into this further, if issues do come up as you're providing housing and you encounter questions around these issues. We can't give legal advice at our office, but we have lots of resources and have been doing this for years, so are happy to share any information we can with you on how different solutions we've seen to common problems over the years. Some examples of reasonable accommodations might include allowing an animal, and even when there's a no pet policy. And I will say that the guidance from HUD and the Department of Justice around accommodations, reasonable accommodations, says that housing providers may not charge a fee or a deposit in connection with an accommodation. So if you typically allow pets, or even if you don't, and somebody says, I need this animal to assist me because of my disability, and they can demonstrate that, then you could not charge a pet rent or a pet fee or a deposit in connection with approval or permission to have that animal. They would still be required to maintain the property in good condition, and your security deposit would, just like any damage caused by the tenant, be used if there were damage at the end of their tenancy as a result of the animal's presence. Other common things are reserved parking space, or adding an accessible parking space for somebody who requires that near the entrance to their unit or to the entrance to the building. Permitting somebody to have a live-in aide. Allowing somebody who's not a tenant to use the laundry room to help the tenant do their laundry. Changing the rent due date. This is another common one. A lot of folks who receive SSI or SSDI in connection with a disability, public assistance, don't receive that income at the first of the month, but rent is usually due at the first of the month, and so adjusting their rent due date might be a reasonable accommodation. They'll always pay, they just have a different due date than maybe the rest of your tenants, and not incur late fees or penalties as a result of the fact that they get their income through disability-related benefits. I do want to point out at the bottom, it's very important, if you haven't ever gotten a call from the Ohio Relay Service, if somebody is deaf or hard of hearing and wants to call somebody who is hearing on the telephone, they use a relay service. And the typical setup is that they are in front of a screen and they are assigning to an interpreter, and the interpreter is voicing what they say to you on the phone. And so they may not sound like the person that you think they are, their name and their voice might not jive for you. They may, all kinds of questions can come up, but it's very important that the calls usually start with sort of like a beep or a click and then a pause, and then somebody comes on and says, this is operator blah, blah, blah with the Ohio Relay Service. By that point, many people think telemarketer, hang up, right? So you don't want to keep hanging up on deaf callers who are interested in renting your properties, right? that can be a problem. So I always want to point that out, just to be prepared if you ever would get a call from the Ohio Relay Service. And the caller ID does come up as Ohio Relay Service, at least on business phones or landlines. Reasonable modifications are physical changes. Again, this is another right afforded to people with disabilities under the law. Big question comes up, who pays, right? These are generally at the tenant's expense, right? Unless you receive federal financial assistance in connection with your housing. So like direct money from the federal government to provide housing, like a public housing authority or a subsidized apartment building would fall into those categories. If you rent to somebody who has a voucher, a rental voucher, a subsidy, that is a tenant-based subsidy. You are not the recipient, the beneficiary, and the recipient is the tenant. So it would still, the modifications in that situation would still be at the tenant's own expense. Folks can ask again at any time, and the modification has to be related to someone's disability. So somebody might say, I need to install some grab bars. I'm struggling in the bathroom, at the toilet and at the shower stall. I need to put something in so that I can safely use my shower. I have trouble with balance. Right? You would need to permit that modification, but they would need to be able to pay for it and do the installation. Some folks say, I'd rather do the installation. You can certainly offer that, to your tenants if that's your preference.
I know you said the question is too later, but this is like, I'm going to forget about it. Can you force them to take them out when they leave the property?
So that's a great question. For those who might not have heard, what happens at the end, right? When somebody moves out after they've modified the unit. So certain modifications certainly wouldn't make sense. So in this last picture, we have a woman on the far left there. She is in a chairlift that helps her get up and down the stairs because she's not able to do the stairs by walking, right? Certainly you'd want the hardware removed, you'd want the wall repaired when they move out in a situation like that. For grab bars, you might want them to come out if it's a lot. Some people might think, that's kind of handy. Everybody could use something to hold on to getting in and out of the shower. So, in doorways that get widened, you wouldn't say, narrow it down so everybody has to squeeze their couches through really hard like I did, So, it's on a case-by-case basis. Generally, if it's in a common area, it doesn't have to be restored to its original condition. If it's in the interior of the unit, that can be a stipulated requirement. The law also provides that there is, that the housing provider can say it has to be done in a worker-like fashion, right? If permitting is required or things like that, that they would obtain, any necessary permits to make the modifications to the home. But yeah, if you had counters lowered, you'd certainly want those elevated again in your kitchen for the next tenant.
So who would be responsible for that cost?
That is at the tenant's cost, and with a modification, if there is some significant thing like that where there would be an expectation of a financial outlay for restoration on the back end, the housing provider is permitted to require the tenant to establish an escrow account for that purpose. So some common modifications might be things like widening doorways, installing grab bars, lowering cabinets, putting in a ramp, to get in or out of a unit. Installing or removing carpeting, changing out doorknobs, for example, right? So here's the answer to that question. Interior of the unit, right? And escrows permitted in order to, provide reasonable assurances. So now that we know all the groups that are protected by the law, what are the actions that would indicate discrimination, right? What did we outlaw? What acts specifically did we outlaw? When we passed the Fair Housing Act, we said it is illegal to refuse to rent, sell, negotiate, or to otherwise make housing unavailable, right, on the basis of or because of someone's race, religion. These are all because of, right? So you could not rent to somebody, right, but it's not illegal discrimination unless you didn't rent because of race, religion, et cetera, right? Some characteristic that's protected under the law. So for example, you might be a smoker, right? And you try to rent a place and the housing provider says, I don't rent to smokers. That's definitely discrimination against smokers, but it is not considered unlawful discrimination, right? So they also said it's illegal to discriminate in the terms, conditions, or privileges of the sale or rental of a dwelling. Terms or conditions might be, yeah, you're welcome to live here, but your children can't use the pool because the kids are little and I don't want any worries about that, right? Well, maybe that's the main attraction, right? My kids love swimming, right? To make, print, or publish any notice or statement or advertisement that indicates a preference, limitation, or discrimination based on a protected characteristic. So this includes our speech. That's really important. So it's not just the Craigslist posting that you throw up on the internet, it's also your speech when you're in conversation with a prospective tenant or a current tenant that you have, right? So we would not want to state a preference or, I really like single people with no kids, right? That's an obvious, right, message to the recipient if they have children. You don't prefer me, right? That might be discrimination, right? So lying and saying a unit's not available because of someone's race, religion, et cetera. Denying an accommodation, to coerce, intimidate, threaten, or interfere with somebody, or to retaliate is also outlawed. That one's really important because it is hard to be accused of discrimination. And if that would ever happen to you, if somebody would file a complaint, it's really hard to not say, what have I done, and I want to address this, and you want to go through the process though, and you definitely don't want to lash back out and say, that's it, I'm just going to not rent to you anymore, right? Because even if you might have been not held liable or found to have violated the law on the first issue they grieved on, when you retaliate by non-renewing their lease or kicking them out or doing something like that, that certainly will rise to that level. I am going to go quickly here in the interest of time, but just share with you that HUD did issue some guidance in 2016 on criminal background screening. It is important that you not just say no felony convictions, that you have a policy that is nuanced and that any criminal background screening that you would engage in or deny people housing for be related to, a real legitimate concern for safety, and that you can show that particular offense might pose a direct threat to the health or safety of your property or other residents. Criminal activity nuisance ordinances are another issue. These are local laws that would penalize a property owner for the behavior of the occupants. So that could be owner-occupied or it could be tenants living there. But the reason we mention that is because oftentimes these ordinances are found to be enforced against victims of domestic violence, people with mental health crises, people in a drug overdose situation, and group homes for folks with disabilities. I will just fast forward here to the best practices and say, best to start off with a non-discriminatory list of rental criteria before you advertise your unit. Know what your standards are. Tell everybody the same standards, right? When they inquire, this is what I look for in a tenant, right? Advertise the unit, describe the property, not the people that you're thinking might want to live in it, right? Because people will be drawn to the property description, and you can avoid any potential advertising discrimination complaints that way. If you conduct a credit and or background check, get somebody's written authorization first and adhere to the Fair Credit Reporting Act and Fair Housing Law. It's important, again, that if you're going to take an adverse action, deny somebody based on something you find in those third-party reports, that you notify them so that they have a right to see, look at what it was, and appeal if something was factually incorrect, because errors do occur there. Review the applications in the order they come in and approve the first qualified applicant. So you can learn more about us, follow us online, and please, we certainly hope to hear from you if we can be a resource to you in your work. Thank you.
I feel better. Can you see me now? Now we'd like to introduce somebody I did forget to mention. Mary Coleman is the mayor's assistant, and she has a very important information about the upcoming Census 2020.
Hi, I'm here on behalf of Mayor George because she couldn't be here tonight. Just want to remind everyone about the upcoming Census 2020 and how important it is. What is a real problem is that a lot of people think that they don't have to fill it out because they are renters. So they do. You don't fill the census out for them. What we're hoping you can do is email all of your tenants and tell them, don't forget to fill out your census information. It's your responsibility, not ours. They'll get their first mailer around March 14th. The mailings come out between the 12th and the 20th, but around the 14th. And so maybe sometime before that, you could just email them and let them know that is their responsibility. A lot of the funding for schools and vital programs comes from that information. And for every child that's not counted, the schools lose funding for that child for the next 10 years. They still have to educate them, but they don't get the funding. So it is really important. So we really want to try and get a full count, and we hope that we can count on you to help us with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
Oh, and I forgot, if you haven't gotten your new updated manual, they're up here. I can grab it away up. Yes?
What is the city doing to market that census? Are you putting it on Facebook, social?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We've got all kinds of stuff planned. You'll be seeing it soon. You'll be tired of seeing it soon, probably.
All right, and if there's 3 single men living in a unit, is each individual person receiving census, or is that particular unit receiving one pamphlet?
That's a good question. Everybody will probably receive it. Only one person needs to fill it out, but they will need the information for each person. You need that person's name and date of birth. So, just, yes, sir?
Yeah, who are these people coming around now, father
anybody coming around now about
There
census.
is.
Oh, well, then tell your tenants to, get some information, to ask them for some identification. And then I would call the police and report them. There are no census people out yet.
Well, that one unit, 2 weeks ago, and there was a lady there saying that she's from the census. And I told her that I'm the landlord, there's nobody here. And
Yeah.
I had a hard time getting her out of there.
The census workers don't come out until after people have received 4 notices and not responded. So they're not gonna be coming out for a while.
They are.
So, yeah, I would call and report that. Okay, anybody else? Yeah?
I've had letters dates already.
Letters? Oh, well, I know that, the Republican Party has a letter they're sending out that says census on the top. That's not our census. That's what they're calling their questionnaire, but that's not the real census. Some people don't think that's a problem. I do, but some people think that's fine. Okay, anybody else? All right. You're all gonna get counted? Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. That is very important to the city, and, you know, if the city's doing well, then landlords are doing well because their property values are going up. Next, we have Chris Parmalee, the Assistant Building Commissioner.
Good evening, everybody. We have some friends that are standing in the back, so if you got a vacancy next to you, raise your hand. Maybe everybody can sit down, unless we like standing. That's entirely up to you, too. Let's see, remember to do this. Yay, there we go. All right, like Chief Dunphy said, I'm Chris Parmalee. I am the Assistant Building Commissioner for the City of Lakewood. A handful of people probably interacted with me before. We have a bunch of changes that occurred, but just to get a feel of the room, how many people have done the landlord training seminar before? Show of hands. Okay, a whole bunch of people. Who's new to being a landlord? Cool. All right. All right. Well, let's get the show on the road. Again, that's me. So there's a bunch of information on these slides coming up. I'm going to go through, hit the quick points. Anybody wants a copy of this thing, email me. Cards are on the table. If you have questions, we'll talk at the end. If you have questions that you don't want to talk about in front of a group of people, that's fine too. Call me, email me, we'll get it straightened out. I live in Lakewood myself. My daughter graduated from Lakewood High last year. I have one in high school. I got one in elementary school. I grew up on Marlowe Avenue. Love this place. It's diverse. It's a great place to call home. I really like it. And I just want to thank everybody for the investment you're making in the community, because it helps all of us. I don't know if anybody's seen the median property values lately. So moving on. So a little bit by the numbers. I don't know how many people actually know this. Almost 51,000 residents. As tight as our community is, we're about almost 9,300 residents per square mile. That's packed. 32,000 housing units. You folks support 55% of the housing stock in the community. It's a big deal. We need your help just as much as you need ours. Median housing values are up to $170,000 now. We got, we're a walkable community, 180 miles of it. And we're all sardined into 5.6 square miles. So needless to say, that's why the building department gets a lot of calls. So your interaction with the big bad building department, okay? We're not there to beat you down, yell at you. We're here for support for you and your tenants. A couple ways that you get interaction from us. I mean, some of you have already probably had it. Exterior inspections. Those are inspections just done from the right of way. The building department does not have time to walk up and down every street to make sure you painted your front stairs, all right? What we do is a triannual housing survey where we physically get the building department together and we rate every house in the city 1 to 4. 1's great, 4 we got to talk. And it's usually a 3-year rotation. By the time we get down the list, it's time to do it all over again. But we do physically walk every street in the city for every residential property. So like I said, it helps you guys too. Again, look at the property values. Safety and maintenance inspections. Once you are a landlord, that puts you on a 4-year list to have what we call a safety and maintenance inspection, okay? The inspection is not based on any state building codes. It has nothing to do with CMHA, none of that. It's all based on our codified ordinances. Chapter 1306 is our property maintenance code. That's what we're looking for. You know, make sure you don't have, it's exterior and interior as well. It's comprehensive. Make sure you don't have peeling paint everywhere. Make sure fire department's got their smoke detectors. Make sure we have handrails. Make sure the place is in good shape. You know, I mean, we all want somewhere nice to live. Let's see, certificate of code compliance inspections, long-winded. That wasn't my idea. They kind of get rolled in. They're also called point-of-sale inspections. Anytime you sell a rental property in the city of Lakewood that has been rental property for the past 24 months, that has not been an owner-occupied double, this is why you're going to be emailing me questions. So if it's an owner-occupied double, you don't need a housing license. We all know that. So, but when you're selling your rental property that you have a housing license on, it's in the codified ordinance. It just got reinstated in April. We didn't start enforcing it until September. That's the inspection. It's same thing as a safety and maintenance inspection, but the codified ordinance says you have to have that done before the property sells. The buyer gets notified of the corrections that are there. Either you make the corrections or the buyer can assume the violations in the building department. They sign an acknowledgement form. They say they're going to make the repairs within an allotted time. You guys are off the hook. We deal with the new buyer. Pretty basic. You know, you're gonna wind up doing construction projects on your property. You might be submitting construction documents. That's when we start talking state building code. Any alterations, kitchen renovations, you know, you want to finish the 3rd floor, any of that stuff needs state approval, so we do require plans. You're doing a driveway, you know, putting some front porch decking on, painting your house, have at it. No approval, no permits required for that. Driveway, permits, no plans. Again, if you have any questions, we can talk at the end, or you can shoot me an email. Housing licenses is a big one. We had one heck of a time in the building department in 2019 because we rolled out, we have a citizen serve portal, show of hands, who fought with that and swore the building department up and down. It's getting better. We have it dialed in for this year. City Council made all housing licenses due November 1. That was starting in 2019. It used to be commercial or residential was January, commercial was December. It used to be a lot easier on everybody, the system and my office. Roll into an additional 720 non-owner occupied condominiums. It's a ton of rental property. So, which is part of the reason we went electronic with this thing. If we have time at the end, I can run through an application real quick. It's not terrible. We clean the system up a lot, but we do this, contractors register online through the portal. Housing licenses are done. I just got done putting the finishing touches on our food truck licensing program. So, you know, gonna have that going on too. Again, any questions, we'll talk. And big one too, complaints. We don't cut your grass. Just cut your grass. The neighbor doesn't need to call dad and tell you to cut your grass. We'll cut it for you. It's $200, and I'm telling you, our public works department is not going to do as nice a job as you do. So let's cut the grass. Shovel the sidewalks. My kids walk to school. I grew up on Marlowe. Walked like 13 blocks to Lincoln Elementary. Shovel the sidewalk. You know, we got little kids. If it's not for anybody, it's for the kids so they can get to school. And my favorite complaint that comes in, and we can't avoid it, and neither can you, is you have a discrepancy with the tenant. You are, Mr. Kalani, back there smiling, you're in the middle of an eviction process. My phone rings. Oh my God, this place is terrible. You know, the landlord's awful. They haven't done this and that. The ceiling's caving in. If we get a complaint, I have to send an inspector out. I can't brush it off. There's no way to curb that. I've asked our law department several times. There's nothing we can do. I mean, what I've done in the past, because I haven't done this job forever, you know, I started as a code compliance officer, 6 years ago when I started with the city. So I've seen it on both ends. we have a tendency to work with the land. You know, if there is some outstanding issues, let's get them fixed. We'll work with you. You're in the middle of an eviction. It's a nightmare process to go to. Laws involved. It's awful. So that's that. That's my favorite. I'm getting thrown out of my place and I'm going to start trouble complaint. Housing license and changes. I kind of went over this earlier. The real new things. Number one, the Citizen Serve portal. Number two, non-owner occupied condominiums. The condominium associations used to take care of those housing licenses. They no longer do that. That all goes through the Citizen Serve account as well. Non-owner occupied, one families, obviously. Non-owner occupied, two family. Even if it's owner occupied, three family, you need a housing license there. Owner occupied, two family, no housing license. Multifamily, the apartment buildings, you know, we obviously need housing licenses on that. And again, we'll just, if you're the owner, you personally occupy one of the units in a one, obviously one, or two family dwelling, no housing license. Have at it. Have somebody else pay half your mortgage. I wish I would have done the same thing. Vacant property licenses, okay? You buy a house, grandma dies. You buy a house, you buy grandma's house, okay? But you know that place is gonna sit vacant for over a year. It's a vacant property registration that gets it on the radar. So our property maintenance folks can keep an eye on the property, make sure windows aren't getting broken out, be able to notify first responders if there's some, unforeseen drama going on. But that's just for your vacant properties. And again, that November 1st date, we were pretty lenient on it last year. I don't know how many mailers we sent out, how many phone calls I took that somebody got repeat mailers. Throw it out, fold it, level a table with it. If you don't need it, you don't need it. But November 1st is the due date for everybody now. And it's a burden on the department too, not just you folks to change the date around. What else we got? So your all famous late fee this year will be assessed after 4:30 in the afternoon, November 1st. So, and unlike times in the past, your housing license does need posted in a conspicuous area. Common hallway, if it's an apartment building, put it in the foyer, front vestibule, somewhere like that. Because that has, if not your phone number on it, your property manager's contact information. Busted water line in the middle of the night, tenants need to know who to call. If you have any questions, that 130643 through 130652 of the codified explains all the changes when it comes to rental registration, housing licenses, inspections, et cetera. Man, that's a full slide. I put this all together too, and I'm complaining about it. So right up top, Citizen Serve, or www, who does that? You don't have to anymore. citizenserve.com/Lakewood OH, that gets you to the portal, okay? On that portal, first things first, create an account, just like Amazon, your My Ford Care, whatever. You have to create an account. Once you create that account, that doesn't mean you have a housing license. And this isn't just for that either. Once you create an account, you want to do some, renovations to the property. You can submit permits to us online through Citizen Serve. You can pay for your permits online through Citizen Serve. Print your permits out through Citizen Serve. It's not like we don't like seeing you and say hi, but if you don't want to come and see us, it's getting to the point where you don't even have to walk into the office anymore. Saves your guys time. We do have, for the folks that have a hard time or never seen a computer before in their lives, we have 2 customer service kiosks set up in the building department. Our front office staff will be more than happy to walk you through the process if you need help. We keep those up. Contractors use them all the time to get registered. So any, or if you need assistance getting into your account, forgot your password, we have access to that stuff. We can help you with that. Again, that 216-529-6270, that is the main line to the building department. If you have any questions, concerns, you need help, you need somebody to help walk you through the housing license process, we're there. Call me. just call us. We're there. I put something new on the building department site today. It says, click here to meet the building department. So you could see everybody's smiling face that works down in the building department. So you'll know who's coming to your house, what they look like. It's good for the community. I don't like strangers showing up at my house. Sidebar, that whole knocking on the house, knocking on your door, unannounced, first thing you ask that person is to see their solicitor's license. When they look at you like a deer in the headlights, tell them to beat it or you're calling the police. Because you cannot solicit in the city of Lakewood without a solicitor's license. It runs through the building department, goes through background check procedure with the law department. We don't want, unsavory characters knocking on doors in the city. And if you don't want people knocking on your door, fill out the do not knock registry online. It's right online. We don't provide a do not knock sticker. Go to Drug Mart, they're like $1.89. I got one on my front door. Little tidbit right there. Back to housing licenses. The non-owner occupied condominiums are $45, and I'm not gonna go through the whole spiel. If you have a giant apartment building, the limit's $3,500. Again, vacant housing structure, registration, $200 down the bottom right. So I'd write these down if you can, take a photo. So Citizen Serve, you're gonna wanna keep that email. You're gonna wanna keep that web address. Residential Code of Ohio, that link gets you to all the state of Ohio building codes, every one of them. Mechanical, fuel gas, residential, commercial. It doesn't do you any good when it comes to any codified ordinance. There's a wall between that. State law and codified law, two completely different animals. City of Lakewood zoning code, that's a good one. You want to know how big my garage can be, how far away from a property line does this shed have to be, how tall can I build a garage? Can I put a 9-story addition on my house? The answer is no, but if you want to look it up, it's right there. Building department, we're there 8 to 4. We stop taking payment at 3 o'clock. So if you come in to pay for 3:10, we're going to tell you to come back. We have to balance at the end of the day. Email, housing.building@lakewoodoh.net. You can reach us there. Everybody has an email address. You can reach us there. There's no reason why you can't contact us anytime. We're actually in the office till 4:30. Last half hour of the day is for some paperwork. City Hall doors close at 4 o'clock. If you need to talk to an inspector after that, talk to the inspector. Special circumstances will let you into the building. What else we got? So let's go back to this. If anybody wants a copy of this, I don't know why, because you want to have trouble sleeping, let me know. I'll email it to you. No problems there. So quick Q&A. Anybody have any general questions? That's a ton of stuff I went over in, 20 minutes. But yeah, go ahead.
Does the website have a list of approved contractors?
So it has a list of registered contractors. We don't approve or deny contractors. We can't tell you who's good, who's better, who's best, who to leave in the dust. What we can tell you is on that list, any contractor that lands on that registered contractor list carries the adequate insurance that the city requires, and they're licensed with the city to do the work in the city. Quick story on Edgewater, I think it was about 5 years ago, it was a $125,000 kitchen remodel, okay? Yeah, wow. We didn't see plans, we didn't see permits. She hired an unregistered contractor. We had no name to give the detectives, which sucks. I mean, she was out about $75,000. Get registered with the city, we'll put you on a website. But that's everybody. I mean, it's paint, concrete, additions, whatever it is. If you're unsure if the contractor's registered, give us a call. Typically, contractors don't get registered the first of the year because it costs money. It costs money through each municipality. They usually don't get registered until they sell a job. We got the core group of probably 30 guys that get registered every year. If there's a question, you need help navigating the list, we can't refer anybody. I really wish we could, but we can't. But if you do want to know if the contractor's registered, give us a ring. We'll let you know. It's real easy, yes or no question. Sets it on contractors. Anybody got anything else? Everyone has to get out of here. Oh, there you go.
I've heard that higher liability law, if you shovel your walk and somebody injures himself, then you're liable, whether if you don't do it, then you're not liable, you know?
Man, you know what? See that guy right there? That's the city law director. Snuck in on everybody.
You know, and that's an unsettled area of law. If you shovel it, you have to shovel it responsibly. You have to, and make sure it's done. If you, and I believe there's an ordinance that says you should shovel that you should in fact shovel the sidewalk. Now, if you shoveled it and just left ice there, you know, that's obviously a gray area, a slippery area that you could probably be liable for. But if you shovel it, you have to shovel it in a responsible manner.
If you don't shovel it, then you're not liable.
True.
You won't get a ticket. You can. Sorry, Brian. I don't want to. Yeah. So we don't issue tickets. We don't even issue correction notices for walks. What we do is we kind of send you a notification letter, like shovel your sidewalk. We usually have a big problem with commercial corridors. Detroit, Madison, Franklin by the high school, you know, any streets that the elementary schools are on, Summit, Lincoln, Grants over on Elmwood, we got a bunch of other schools. But you'll see that cleared. Sometimes the school board does it. You know, like Brian said, I mean, you just be responsible with it. You know, don't leave giant hunks of ice. Like, nobody likes walking on a slippery surface. But I mean, God, the way the weather's been, if it snows a day later, it's 85 out, so it doesn't matter. So you know, that was a good question. I always thought the same thing. You know, if I shovel this and somebody eats it on the sidewalk and they break their leg, then they're going to come after me because I was trying to help them. You know, double-edged sword. But that's good input actually right there.
I have a question regarding
Yeah.
complaints and stuff, and you made a joke about, hey, if you want to build 10 stories over your house.
Yeah.
So around this topic, so I live on Marlow, and the site across from us is getting developed. We participated in an event where they presented the project and realized that they are abusing the setback. So they're supposed to have 20 feet, and he provided a plan that shows only 10 feet.
Are you talking about the townhome development by the church at St. Clemens?
So if I am how do I protect myself living across the street?
So
I'm pretty sure you're not gonna let me build 10 feet in front of my home, right?
here's
And talking with the developer,
Mhm.
I asked that same question. He was like, well, yeah, you could do it, it's just gonna cost you a lot of money.
It doesn't cost you any money.
Fraud?
No, that's what you're talking about is a zoning variance, okay? But what you're also talking about is something going through planning commission to change the zoning district to a PD. It's a planned development zoning district, just like the same thing that happened at McKinley Place, right? Where they tore McKinley School down. Right, so they go through a lengthy process with the planning commission and the zoning board to actually have their zoning district changed to a PD, a planned development zoning district, side yard setbacks, maximum height requirements, it's all different. The only board I sit on is Architectural Board of Review. When it comes to any of those questions, the Department of Community Development could give you a little more insight on how and why and what process they had to go through to have that approved.
So does that mean if they get it, everybody that lives around gets it too?
No, it's just wherever it's within, yeah, well, the only thing I could say is everybody has to go through the same process. You know, if you want to exceed your maximum lot coverage, you're going to go through a zoning review, okay? It's a Board of Zoning Appeals, it's $25. You know, I want to build my garage 30 square foot more than I'm allowed to. That's a zoning. When it comes to these projects like St. Clements, that's been going on for talks about probably 3+ years on how that was going to go. Questions like that, I'm not tap dancing around it. I just don't have the answer to give you. But I can tell you that I'm about 90% sure that lot got rezoned to a PD, which is a planned development, which changes every setback known to man. You're no longer in a R2, R1H, R1L, whatever, so.
And there's nothing you could do
As a neighborhood, you can petition, you know, go to your community meetings, go to the zoning reviews, go to architectural board of review, you know,
All I heard when I went is like, oh, this is a lot that never paid taxes. They said that this is a lot that never paid taxes, so how I'm gonna win the fight?
yeah, well, I got one going up down at the bottom of my street on Rosewood, so I feel you. I'm right there. Like I said, we can talk afterwards if you want. Go ahead.
From your presentation, it sounds like the city's gonna start inspecting housing, or rental housing. I've had houses for a while, I've never had an inspection. Does that mean the city's gonna start?
We've always done them, all right, but it was almost like the wild draw on who's going to get an inspection. The past couple years, we've tried really hard to tailor our department to be a little softer with the community, to build a better relationship with you guys, tenants, contractors. We're revamping the way we do things a little bit. So that's why we say it's a 4-year turnaround for these safety and maintenance inspections, which is a giant elephant to eat. I mean, it's a ton of properties. We're doing the same thing on the commercial end. 4-year rotation, every commercial building in the city is going to be inspected too. You know, we just have different groups of people doing that. So give me your address. I mean, we'll sign you up. We'll see you on Tuesday. No, but I mean, expect you're going to get an inspection request letter in the mail, okay? It's a request. We're not kicking your door in, okay? If we want to get in, we'll get in. I mean, it's simple as that. It's an administrative search warrant. But I've only had to do that twice since I've been here. And the building was really, really rough, almost to the point where it needed to be condemned, and it's since been sold. If you're giving us that hard of a time to come in, that's letting us know that you're hiding something awful in there. So, up front.
Last year, I went online to get my licenses and they didn't pop out of the machine. Can I get copies of them on the citizen's?
Yeah, if you create an account, you can go on your account, print out your housing, and anything you do through that is accessible for you. You know, permits or whatever, housing licenses. Get used to navigating it. Like I said, it's not going anywhere, and we're trying to make it better. In the back?
The rating of the assessment of the experience.
Yeah.
Is that available only if we email you or we ask?
No, we haven't came up, I don't think they came up with the new map. I'll have to look into that. We do have a map in the building department. I'm not sure if it's from the 2017 survey, but it's up there. And it might be available online too, on the city website. That's a good, I'm gonna check tomorrow to make sure that thing's on there. It lays out you can kind of see the concentrated pockets. I think 2 surveys ago, it was like 2,100 homes. No, it wasn't. No, it was 1,100 homes that fell in like the 3 or the 4 category, which is, if it's a roof or a driveway, it's a 3. Those are big ticket items. The new survey, we were under 400, which is huge. We're doing a good job. I mean, we're taking care of our homes. These things are going into their second set of 100 years. You know, light frame wood construction lasts up to 400 years in England. We can do the same thing here if we take care of it. Yep, go ahead. So you'd have to take the map and zero in. Yeah, you could zoom in on the map and see where your just kind of count where you are, because there's no addresses, but yeah, check mine out. Yep, in the back.
Question. We've had occasions where these people that are trying to change their suppliers and for gas and electric.
Yeah.
Going around banging buzzers, trying to get into my building.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, they got into some buildings and we had some confrontations.
Okay.
They come after dark, they're, like one of them, they couldn't even been legit. We looked them up on the internet, they didn't even exist. But, they hop and skip through the building. I mean, are they, if they're legit, supposed to give their workers, like, solicitation?
what happens is like, so if you're talking about like the companies that, like, hey, I'll give you the best rate on gas, right? So what usually happens is they have a field foreman or field supervisor. Whoever is doing the soliciting has to come into the department. So like, what's it, GIS? Is that one of them? Natural GIS, natural energy or whatever. So when they come in, there's usually like 10 people applying for solicitors' licenses, because it doesn't get issued by the company, it gets issued by the individual. So if your company has 10 people that want to solicit, those 10 people are getting background checks. I mean, we don't just shove these things through. If you, like I said, if you do get somebody that knocks, ask to see their solicitor's license, ask to see their do not knock registry. Those are the 2 items that they should have on them at all times when they're soliciting in the city. If they don't, call police non-emergency. Guarantee you one of our boys in blue are not more than 2 minutes away. I had the same thing with a guy from Dish Network or something last year. I was eating dinner, I went to close the door, he put his foot in my door and held my wife, yeah, I wanted to go after the guy. It was, my kids are standing right there, it's crazy. Yeah, so there you go. Solicitors, right? Ask for the documentation. It's important. If they tell you they don't have it, tell them to beat it. I mean, you don't have to talk to them. So there's a curtilage law, right? So curtilage allows anybody to go to your front porch. Your front porch is inviting the public, right? Mailman goes up there, Amazon guy, UPS guy. That curtilage line stops at the building line. Once you pass the curtilage line, you are now trespassing. That's why when we do our inspections, it's from right away, visible from view from the public right away. If somebody goes, oh, you had a building inspector in your backyard, let me know. They're getting written up and probably fired the next week. We're not trespassing. Not happening. It's curtilage.
City still passing out, what is it, the 100-year plaque for the house?
I think that's all ran through the Historical Society now. I checked with Chamber of Commerce on that one. So you have to pay for the plaque? Gentleman right here said you have to pay for the, is that through the Historical Society? Okay. So you get a cheap sticker to smack on your siding, or you can pay, whatever to get the plaque. Anybody else have anything in the back?
Are you going to send out the reminder for the November renewal?
So the system's set up to send a batch email. It's probably, I want to say around September-ish. There's going to be email blast that goes out. If you have to provide us with an email address to set up an account. If we do not have an email address for you, there's a separate report that gets ran, so you'll get paper notification. So if you're expecting an email from the city, check your junk mail, check your spam. Around September, check your junk mail, check your spam. Last year, I think we sent out 3 notifications. It costs money. I mean, everybody's privy to the November 1 date. If you're not, there's going to be information on the city website, but we will send an email blast to remind everybody about the November 1 due date. Absolutely. Anybody else? Negative. All right, I have, there's business cards. You got one? No? Oh, you can clap. There's business cards on the table. Feel free to call me direct. If you call me at 5 o'clock, I'll call you back the next day. Cards up here.
Thank
You
you.
folks have a good night. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you.